Hey guys, it's Christine, also known as IvyWinter. Thank you for joining me for another Disneyland Paris video. I've been requested to do a few different planning videos about Disneyland Paris. I know some of you are actually planning your own trips to Disneyland Paris soon, and so I definitely wanted to get out some of my experiences from my trip. Just a preface, I only went the one time, so I'm not trying to pose myself as a total expert, but from the experience that I've had and the many times I've been to Disney World and Lake Parks. And the many times I've been to Disney World, I definitely saw a lot of differences in how I planned for Disneyland Paris versus Disney World. So I wanted to talk through them a little bit because I think the biggest question people have is, how is Disneyland Paris different? What should I be thinking about, and is it going to be the same sort of intensive planning as Disney World? So here's my top 5 planning for Disneyland Paris versus Disney World tips. Number 1 is no, it is not nearly as intensive of planning as Disney World. Now, partly that has a lot to do with the size of Disneyland Paris. It is only 2 parks as opposed to the 4 in Disney World, and even those parks are not necessarily huge. Disneyland Paris proper is pretty big, though not as large as the Magic Kingdom, and Walt Disney Studios, their other park, is, I would say, fairly small. I'm not really sure how it exactly holds up acre to acre with the Disney World parks, but I'm going to guess that it is smaller than all of them, just from my own experience. I was basically able to kind of take my days as I went. There are, of course, a couple of things that you need to keep in mind. There's always going to be popular rides, and you're going to want to, go to Crush's Coaster as soon as you get to Walt Disney Studios in the morning, so you don't have to wait for a very long line. And same for Big Thunder Mountain in Disneyland Paris. I would say those are the two that, if you are going to go for opening or the extra magic hour, then you do want to plan to go there first. But other than that, I feel like my plans were pretty open. I kind of took things as they came, even when it came to getting fast passes, which they do have the paper fast pass system. I never felt like I had to be too crazy about all of the different ones that I got. Sure, you can go that far if you really want to plan out what your fast pass strategy is going to be, by all means, especially if you have less time. But I never felt the same pressure that I had from Disney World, and I certainly didn't feel nearly as exhausted at the end of every day. The only reason I was tired was because I was jet lagged, but I feel like if I wasn't, the whole experience is a lot less tiring. You also still do want to plan your reservations for restaurants. Those book up. I think that's kind of a standard for most Disney parks, right? People want to ensure their meals, so that's something you want to plan ahead as well. But other than that, like in terms of attractions and what you're gonna go see and entertainment and shows, I found that I could kind of pick and choose as I went along and never had too terrible of an experience or too long of waits. Point number 2 is you don't need to factor in as much travel time if you were staying on property. I say if because there are definitely off-property hotels, much like the other resorts in the United States. So obviously then, yes, you would want to consider, what bus or shuttle that you're going to be needing to take. But if you're on property, even some of the further hotels can still be walkable. Even though you do have to factor in some walk time, I would say anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes depending on where you're staying, you're not worrying about the bus showing up on time, or when is the ferry coming around, or is the monorail broken down? No tea, no shade, but let's be real. There's no reliance on other transportation. There can be. These hotels do have shuttles that take you to the park, but I kind of found them pointless. I stayed at Sequoia Lodge. The walk was probably about 12 minutes to get around the lake and through into Disney Village. You do your security at Disney Village, so you don't have to do it at the parks, and then boom, I was in the parks. I think that being able to control your travel time by walking is so much better. And although Disney World's transportation system is robust and impressive, you can be a slave to how it's running, so that's not really the deal with Disneyland Paris. Number 3, you don't need as many days. Now again, this has to do with the size of things. I found that 2.5 days was pretty good. I would have liked a full 3. There were a couple of shows I wish I had time to catch, and I wanted to do a little bit more exploring, but if you're not me and you don't care so much about taking in every little thing, 2 days would even be enough. You just don't need that much time because of the size of the parks and because of the number of attractions are a bit lower than what we have. So it kind of makes it an easier trip to plan for because you're not trying to figure out 7 days of things to do. You're looking at 2, maybe 3. And if you're doing 3, I mean, it's at a very relaxed pace. So you definitely do not need to go crazy with having too many days there, unless of course you just want to be immersed in Disneyland Paris for a week. By all means do it. Number 4, you'll need to be slightly more aware of a language barrier if you're an English speaker, and I say slightly because the only time it really was a thing was during certain rides where French was playing. It was never an issue with cast members. I've said this before, they all spoke every language imaginable. I saw them flipping from English to French to Spanish to Portuguese, one guest after another, without hesitation, from food service to the stores to ride operations. They're fantastic. But when it comes to the actual rides and pre-shows and different dialogue, you're going to hear that in a lot of cases, half of it's in French and half of it's in English. The English is enough to give you an idea of what's happening, but obviously you're gonna feel like you're missing out a bit if you don't know French. You're not gonna understand what maybe a couple of characters are saying. Just prepare yourself for that. I don't think it really took away from the experience at all because they had English within a lot of the rides, but prepare yourself for not being able to maybe totally understand the Haunted Mansion spiel or everything that the animatronics are saying in Pirates. That's just something you have to keep in the back of your mind. And lastly, my 5th difference between Disneyland Paris planning and Disney World planning is that you kind of need to rewire your brain to their map because it's slightly different from a Magic Kingdom and it can definitely throw you off. So the first big difference that I noticed was that instead of starting with Adventureland and then moving on to Frontierland, if you're going, you know, left to right, they start with Frontierland and then move into Adventureland. So just flip those lands in your brain and that's how the layout is. It definitely confused me a little bit when I first got there because I'm just so used to it being the other way around. Second, there's no Tomorrowland, it is Discoveryland. It is not a sci-fi futuristic Tomorrowland, it's more of a Jules Verne sort of style, steampunk-esque land. So that is also quite different and something that you need to remember. No Tomorrowland, Discoveryland. So that's it. Those are my 5 tips for planning for Disneyland Paris versus Disney World. Some slight differences, nothing too crazy. If anything, a little bit more of a chill experience. If you've been in Disneyland Paris and you've got some other differences that have stood out to you, please leave them in the comments below. If you like this video, then like it. If you like me, you should subscribe. I make videos every single week, and I super appreciate you guys sticking around. If you guys haven't checked out the book club that I'm doing, check the last video. I will link it somewhere here. And do check out the Discord. I'm gonna have it in the description below. It is not just book club discussion, it's everything discussion. So I would love to meet you guys there. People seem to be making friends there and stuff, which has been really cool. So definitely to come join the community. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great rest of the day. Bye.